you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Snap Bingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College, Dabigo Road. GMS Snap Bingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.
Hello and welcome to Second Take with IDK, a brand new week, brand new opinions from Mr. Opinion here, Isma Dakaba Chigongo. He'll be telling us a little bit one day, I think, why they called you Mr. Opinion when you were in school. But hello, Isma, good to see you.
Hello, Mabel. Glad to be here. Glad to be here for another week.
Another week
of Second Take with IDK.
Are you celebrating anything?
This week, largely no. I've always argued that my life does not have highlights and lows. It's every day is almost the same. Maybe in a bit of news that everyone has perhaps seen by now, the passing of that woman MP from Kalangala, Hellen Nakimuli, and she's going to be discussed, I think, her legacy is going to be discussed on many other shows, and that may not be part of our mandate, and maybe Parliament will pay tribute, but I want to pay a sporting tribute to her. For those who didn't know, Hellen Nakimuli was a volleyball player. She actually did play in the league for Kobap, one of the clubs, for a considerable period of time before she joined Parliament. And even after she joined Parliament in 2021, she continued to play for those early years in the house. And she was also very supportive of her team, Kobap, in the National Volleyball League. I remember our colleague, Emanzi Ndiamuhachi, at Nation Media Group, came to me, and by then Emanzi was relatively new in the newsroom, in the Monitor newsroom, because he had worked elsewhere with other media houses before that. Came to me one morning and wanted to do a story about this member of Parliament who plays in the league. And I asked him, are you sure there is that member of Parliament? And said, yes, you must have seen her, because I used to recklessly attend local sports events, many of them, and I might or must have seen her play in one of those, but not something that I could relate, like how good she was at something, but at least I knew she was playing. So even after she joined Parliament, she continued to play volleyball in the league for her team. And also, I was told by a colleague of ours, Ismail Chionga, that she actually also spent a bit of money taking some players to feature for some teams in Kalangala, where she hailed from. I think every time I saw and listened to her, she was always speaking out on the ills of this government, or the inadequacies, and of course the plight of fishermen and women on the islands, and also the lack of transport means to the island of Kalangala, and the fight for ferries and all the things that island communities, the challenges of island communities. I've only had the chance to go to Kalangala by boat once, a boat that I took from Sese Gateway, that place on Entebbe Road, many years ago. And the reason I went that time was to attend a funeral of someone who was a colleague, rather a burial of a colleague, who was Semwanga Henry. He was a news anchor at Radio 1 way back in time, and had died in a road accident on his way from Ombarara to Kampala, where he had been attending a Kwanjulo Kuhinjira ceremony, and died in a road accident. That was actually the only time I used water transport as transport, because I've had the chance to go for these other tours and all, and you sit in a boat. And it was quite challenging to make it to that side, because to find a boat very early in the morning, then to make it back. And I've seen Nakimuli in the few years she's been in the House, because she was a member of Parliament for 5 years and had also won the re-election to get back and serve another 5-year term before she perished during, immediately after surgery that she was undergoing. So when I first saw the story, my mind ran to one, her sporting career, that many people actually may not even relate to. They may not even know that she was actually playing volleyball. And then thereafter, the kind of thing she's been advocating for our community. So on my behalf and behalf of Second Take with IDK, may the soul of Hellen Nakimuli rest in eternal peace.
Amen. Yeah. I started by asking if you're celebrating something, but we can say you're celebrating her life. I just wanted to say I took part in a marathon, and you were
the Legends Marathon.
The Legends Marathon. And I have upgraded from copper to bronze. So that should be, you saw me do the bronze. So now I'm doing the 10K.
You came from a 5K and you done the 10K?
Yes. Mutowo, you called Andrew.
Andrew Mwangusha, my young brother. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was good, and it seems to, I really love the consistency, and he has so much drive for that.
He has so much passion for that. If you want to see what Andrew does, go to legendsmarathon.com.
Yeah.
Anyway, on Google, you'll find it. He's doing some very good work in helping athletes transition from active sport to the life after sport. We journalists sit on these forums and discuss the struggles and the pains, and we never do anything about it. We discuss it as if it's just a story for extra likes or to sell an extra copy of a newspaper. Now, after we've done all these stories, my colleague, and I call him my young brother, Andrew, decided to go beyond that. He decided to do something about sportsmen and women and teach them financial literacy, coming together. I remember one of the stories that he told me at the start when they had just started this event. Should be what? This is a third or fourth edition? Third edition, yeah. Most of the sportsmen were meeting for the very first time.
Yeah.
I remember Philip Obwinyi, former Uganda Cranes utility player, and also has played for Villa, for Express, he's played for URA, Narubal, and so many other clubs. Was a nomad in his playing career, an excellent footballer with excellent technique. At the first event, he goes out and meets Moses Kipsiro. He had read about him, he had seen him on television, but he had never met him. So he meets Moses Kipsiro and has to ask him about how he's able to do 25 laps without stopping, and how he manages, because the 10,000 meter race, where Kipsiro is a double Olympic champion, rather double Commonwealth champion, is one of the most brutal and the most technical races you can take part in. So it was meeting him for the first time. And I also saw Moses Kipsiro met Flavio Kecho also for the first time. And there's been many. I've seen the rugby people have been very, very supportive. Alex Mubiru has led that rugby brigade. Alex Mubiru is a former Rugby Cranes captain and hooker. Not one of, perhaps for me, the greatest hooker Uganda has produced in the sport of rugby. So he's really brought his troops in. I've seen Naomi Kayondo with the cricket, and those have all come in. Also, our colleague Mark Sally was also part of the latest edition. Yeah, it's a very good initiative that Andrew put up there, and you think it's got to keep growing. It can only get better, because the people we all discuss and talk about their lives, and we discuss them in glory. What if we support them before they fall over the cliff and do not get the same level of attention?
And I think that's a good point to talk about Mike Mutebi, who is now back, who has been given, I guess, a second chance.
Yeah, so one of the best things to happen when we went to watch the game between KCCA and Kitara over the weekend was seeing Mike Mutebi. Big flowers. He walked in with his brother. I think his brother is called Oba. I don't know the other names that come with that. But he came to watch a game between KCCA and Kitara. And you could almost tell you could almost sense the relief and delight of the people who came to Lugogo that day in seeing Mike Mutebi, because the last all of us have heard about him is being found in a plantation, is being hospitalized at a facility in Chisubi and then moved to Mulago. So there's been profound fears about his life. But in our culture, when you see someone walking or someone eating, actually, when someone is eating, if they tell you they've been sick, then you know they are healing. So that's part of the healing. And for the disease that is suspected, and I'm not even a medical expert, that Mike Mutebi is suffering from, Alzheimer's and dementia, in its early stages, I'm told one of the therapies that you can use is to take that person back to the places they are familiar with. So bring Mike Mutebi to Lugogo, I thought, was a very good move. Eventually sat alongside the CEO, Anisha Muhozi, who also walked him out at the end. But I was also told by the people who went to say hello, because he walked by where I was. I didn't find the zeal to go and say hello to him. But I was also told that those who went and said hello to him, he could not recognize them. So it's a very difficult illness that he's dealing with. But also very good to see him walked in a tracksuit, black with a shade of red and stripes of Adidas. Yeah, so it felt good seeing him around football, because that's what all of us know Mike Mutebi for. And hopefully that's all part of a recovery process that should be now entering into another stage. And hopefully we are able to see him back in some kind of better health than he's been in the recent past.
Okay, let's talk about, now that you've talked about that, let's talk about the Uganda Premier League. It's getting tighter at the top.
Very, 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 very tight. Because of that result between KCCA and Kitara. And these days, luckily, for every game we go to, there's some brilliant goals. The other week we talk about Hassan Mubiru.
Yeah.
Now I think Joel Serunjoji deserves his flowers. The goal that he scored against Kitara was a beautiful take from outside the box, outside the 18-yard box, and then he struck it very sweetly. That whatever Medi Chivirige did to get there, he wasn't going to get the ball. But that result meant that now it's largely a 4-horse race at the top of the league, and I need to just confirm with the table just to put the statistics and put a bit of bone to the meat. What we have now is Vipers, who have drawn their previous 2 games. Remember, they drew with Kitara at Kitende, and then they also drew with Villa at Kadiva. They are on 52 points. And then KCC, because of that result, which was their 15th victory of the season, they are on 48. And then Kitara dropped to 3rd on 47, and Villa are on 45. Luckily, most of these teams, some of these teams still have to meet. For example, I know Villa have to travel to Kitara later on in the season. There's just 7 games to the end of the season. So for everything that Ugandan football lacks, and many times we can try to concentrate on the things that we do not do well, whether it's refereeing, whether it's club sustainability, whether players are paid as much as they deserve, whether it's health of the players. There's so many things, whether it's facilities that we lack. One of the things the Uganda Premier League has offered in the past few years is that title races, most of them have gone down to the wire. Villa have squandered the league title on the final day when they conceded that goal to Najib Faisali a few years ago. And we've seen a helicopter hover around Kampala on the final day with a trophy that eventually landed in Chitende. But we've also seen Villa win a league title on the final day of the season when they needed to beat NEC at Lugogo to clinch that title. So, again, just like last season, this one looks destined to go down to at least the final 2 or 3 games of the season. And whoever gets there, the margins are not very big. This week, you'll see Vipers to travel to Buhimba in Hoima, where they should easily win because Buhimba have been one of the poorest sides in the league. Then you'll also see KCCA travel to Entebbe to play against Uganda Printing and Publishing Corporation, UPPC. It should be a very difficult game, a potential banana skin. Then you also have Villa traveling to Lugazi. While Lugazi may not be one of the top sides in the league, they are very, very difficult to beat at that stadium inside the forest in Najembe, Mavira. They can sometimes shed enough skin to compete. So there is enough fixtures here for someone to chew on and say there's still a more twists and turns. This is far from done. And like I said it last week, I thought had Vipers won those two games, or just even the second one against Villa after drawing with Kitara, or had won both, I think they would be champions with games to spare. Now I cannot make the same allegation. This is far from decided, and I've insisted I think Vipers have the more difficult of the fixtures. Not because you could say Buhimba is one of the easy ones, but what about on Wednesday, April 29th, when Vipers travel to Lugogo to play KCCA? Probably that is the final card that KCCA can throw in terms of a title race. If they do not win there and Vipers come to Lugogo and pick a result, then KCCA can as well forget about the league title. Yeah.
Isma, sometime last year when we were working together, we're talking now about the English Premier League. We talked about Arsenal self-destructing, like they had pressed the self-destruct button. I don't know, is that what you would say is happening? Because the pressure is palpable now. You feel the pressure. I even saw a tweet from the Vice Chancellor of Kabale University saying she knows how, Professor Kwesiga, she knows how to handle pressure, and that's what she teaches, management and all that, but she cannot handle the Arsenal pressure. So maybe your friend who sued or is intending to sue Arsenal,
Eric
maybe
Sharma.
he has a point.
I actually think, yes, there is a bit of pressure.
A bit?
There is a lot of pressure. The only person who is not allowing that pressure to get to him, I think right now, is the most important person at the club. That is Mikel Arteta. I like the positivity of the tongue, of the language that he's using in the aftermath of that 2-1 loss at the Etihad to Manchester City, which ensured that the gap is now down to 3 points. And there's a possibility that by the next time Arsenal walk out, they will be second in the league. And I don't remember the last time Arsenal was second. They've been top of the league for a very, very long time.
And you don't remember the last time City were on top?
Were on top of the league, yeah. So, but it's also foolhardy to think that it was going to be a stroll, a walk in the park. You do not win the league by just walking out to kick a ball 38 times a season. You're going to have highs and lows. You're going to have valleys. You're going to have peaks. What we haven't experienced in a very long time is a peak for Arsenal, where they walk out in a game and compete and play like beasts and dominate an opponent. They haven't done that in a very long time. However, there is a lot of positivity, and I want to start with the positivity that Arsenal can take out of that result at the Etihad, because it's the first time in over a month Arsenal actually did play football. They've been doing what you'd call foolery. They've been walking around and playing so poorly that you fear that their season was going to unravel even right before this game played on Sunday. But finally, I thought for this particular one, they were decent. They were more, I could say, more than decent. There were phases when they put City on the back foot, challenged Donnarumma, hit the post, and they were a fairly competitive team. And then the physicality that I thought they wanted to get into. One of the things I thought that Arsenal would have a chance is only if they got physical with Man City. And when they did that, you notice that they get to Haaland. I thought Nkapia was very, very physical on that side against Semenyo on that left side where Semenyo was coming off the right. And those are the areas that I thought Arsenal would be very competitive. But in the end, big games, you can't play well and lose. And that's what I noticed, that Arsenal did play well but still lost. You still need that extra edge. You still need that extra bit of quality that Arsenal do not have, either individual or team quality. That you have run Chucky, who is a refreshing piece of art in football. Because football today is being quoted to be pass and move and position. Now Run Chucky is a bit of a throwback from the past. Players like Ariel Ortega, or you'd go even far back, players like Socrates, for Brazil way back in the late 70s and early 80s. Players for whom football was an art. Yeah, Risto Stoichkov, that kind. The game has moved on from that, or the early years of Messi, or even Ronaldo when he first walked into Manchester United in that debut against Bolton, where he was all trying out all the fancy things. Now, you have run Chuck in an era where every player is being treated like a robot. Pass and move, position, don't do this, don't do that. Coaches are probably telling players a lot more of what not to do than what to do. Now, Ryan Chucky is very refreshing. And I'm just looking at the ages that Man City have over Arsenal right now. That goal that he scored is a throwback from ages gone by when football was that enjoyable and was that beautiful. Then the quality that Erling Haaland brings. Of course, you could start that goal with how one throw by Gianluigi Donnarumma takes out as many as Arsenal 5 players, half the team, when he throws long to Nick O'Reilly, and then thereafter, Arsenal on the back foot. But still in the end, there is Ryan Cherki involved before Erling Haaland buries that after holding off Gabriel. So there are things that Arsenal lack in terms of an edge. And they could pay the price for that, because now that City are in a position where they could soon become the hunted. No one has ever been able to hunt down City. No one of us can go back and say, one day City went top with, even if there were 20 games to spare, and they squandered that. The moment they get to that point, they just switch on, especially when you have a coach in the mold of Pep Guardiola. Because when I mentioned City, someone could argue, but the players I'm talking about are Kevin De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva, and the others. Maybe these are Ranchaki and Semenyo, but the common denominator of all that is Pep Guardiola. That when he's in that position, he's never known how to squander leash. And you've seen how good they've been over the recent past. This may not even be one of their best games. But this wasn't a game where you play well. This is a game which you win. And he had stated earlier before kickoff that if they do not win the game, then the title race is over. And they clearly played like they wanted to win the game and win the league. So it looks like a turning point. It really looks like a turning point. And everyone is feeling the pressure and supports Arsenal. Yes, it's right to feel the pressure. They need to find that extra thing. I would imagine, and this is a hypothesis that may not even be true, that if Arsenal play the same way, for me, they have a 70% chance of winning the league. However, it's very easy to motivate players to show up for a game against City. It may not be the same for a Newcastle, for a Bournemouth, for all the other small games that Arsenal need to win. But if I'm Arteta, go walk in the dressing room and tell them, guys, you did well. We go the same way, we'll win the league.
Okay. Down the road from Arsenal, Chelsea had a better second half, I think, hit the woodwork. But still, Michael Carrick took the day.
Yeah.
Now they are 10 points.
10 points ahead of Chelsea.
Yeah.
And the shot that Man United scored from was their first on target. Matheus Cunha shot off a brilliant cutback by Bruno Fernandes, who is cut himself above the rest of the team, I think, at United. The consistency, the number of artists, if you have to look at the numbers, now on to 18, only 2 away from the league record, which is 20. He should get there. I think you'd wish that he gets there. The best thing about history is to be there to be there when it happens. And when you live in my generation, you've been very lucky, because you've had a chance to see Usain Bolt, you've seen Serena Williams, you've seen Messi, you've seen Sachin Tendulkar. You're a very lucky person in life, and you've also seen Tiger Woods. You're very lucky to live in an era like this. So Bruno, while may not belong to the class of the people I've mentioned, you hope that he gets that record. Then you can tell people that there was a player called Bruno who went and made 20 assists in a season, and not all of them were corner kicks, because if they were, then that is a bit of a dampener. But overall, while there's a lot of positivity about what United have done and Michael Carrick, and it's easy even to argue now that they will be in the Champions League next season because they are 10 points ahead of a team in 6th, and on the top 5 will make it to Europe, it's also very important to take even a second to explain how bad and how poor a team Chelsea is. I thought they were pathetic. Yes, they had the chances you mentioned, they hit the post, but they are very poor. They are not even scary at all when you're playing them. And some of the things that their players do, I watched Alejandro Garnacho, and I feel like if I'm the coach or his agent, I'd pull him off the pitch and punch him, because he was so poor that every time he had the ball, you almost knew there wasn't going to be an end product. Yes, from the people you mentioned who struck the post, there's a Rolly Delap, I think, header. But beyond that, I thought he too was very poor. And you're playing as a lone striker. The basics for me are either you hold up play or run the lines very well. Now Delap does neither. Yeah? The two of them, I watched them and I was at pains. In that moment, I felt sorry for Liam Rosinia, the coach, because you do not go out to coach or to help players play. Let's say, and I'm not even saying Rosinia is good. I think he's also been terrible since the first 4 games. But if the options are Garnacho and Delap, honestly, Chelsea are in for a lot of pain. It's going to be a very difficult finish to the season. And when I look at the table and they are 48 and the team in 47, that is Everton, it could actually get worse before it gets better. When I see Chelsea, I cannot even pick. There's been a positive twist how they were the better side, dominated the ball, how they created a bit of chances. I'm not one of those who is very impressed. I thought they were very poor. And I was so angry watching Garnacho and Delap. Like I insist, I would have plucked them off the pitch.
You mentioned Everton there. Let's talk about the Everton, the Merseyside derby with the first in Dickinson.
Yeah. I think for an entire generation, the only Merseyside derbies we know are those that have been played at Anfield and Goodison Park. So there was a very new feeling around the Hill Dickinson to have a Merseyside derby there. And Everton started the better side, eventually conceded, you could say, against a run of play, because before they conceded, Mamardashvili, the Liverpool goalkeeper, had made some telling saves. Then they concede to the legend that Mohamed Salah is, and then they get an equalizer, but then it's fairly balanced. But I thought Liverpool finished the stronger side. By the time they got that goal in the 100th minute to Virgil van Dijk, in that phase, Liverpool had been the better side. I'd seen Riongo Moha waste a chance. I'd seen Cody Gakpo too waste another. But in the end, the Liverpool side that is fighting for the top 4, the experienced players, the guys who have been there, done that, who provided the finishing touches, that should put Liverpool in a very, very good position to finish in the top 5 and eventually make it to the Champions League. An unforgettable Merseyside derby, because this is a storied game with the most red cards. It's been played over almost 250 times in the history of the game. There were so many storylines. There's farewells for Robertson, for Salah, who are playing their final Merseyside derby, and they may not be the only ones. Then in the end, you have Liverpool who walk out after the game, and they have another injury to a goalkeeper because you don't have Alisson for the last few weeks, and no one knows when he's returning. Then Mamardashvili also gets injured, so you turn to your third choice, Freddie Woodman, who is making his league debut in the derby. So there's so many storylines in there that in the end, Liverpool feel mightily pleased about how the game eventually finished.
Yeah.
And they know maybe if they win another 2 to 3 games, they should have enough to make it to the Champions League, because now they've also built a gap on Chelsea. It's as huge as 7 points. So they need to grow that, I think, to about 10 points too. And then they'll know they've done a well enough job in a very, very forgettable season that they will be playing in the Champions League next season.
Okay, to the other end of the table, Dizabi was saying at the end of the draw that he wants Tottenham to win, but he wants the players' mentality to change. Is that all that is needed for Tottenham to start winning?
It should be one of those. And he actually added that if he finds a player who does not have the right mentality at training, he's going to send that player away from the club. When you haven't won a game for as long as Spurs haven't, and they haven't won in 15.
Unbelievable.
They haven't won a league game this year. They actually last one, I think, in December. You start to question the mentality. But for me, the first thing you question is the confidence. it's just not there. Yes, I thought they had done well enough for 3 points when Xavi Simons scored that goal to put them 2-1 up. And they had taken the lead and then considered an equalizer and then got a second. You thought or you felt the positivity around the club, the manner in which it's celebrated, and the fans, how much they believed and roared their team on. All they needed is perhaps to kick the ball away a few more times than then they would take all 3 points and get out of the bottom three. What happens is their defender, who should have hit that ball into touch, decided to take a touch, and then he was robbed, and then Jorginho Ruta gets that equalizer. So yes, Dizabi is very right to talk about the mentality. When you haven't won in a very long time, and I've always argued that winning, just like losing, is a habit. And it's not, and unfortunately for winning is that it's not something you can switch on. It's not like a switch.
Yeah.
You switch on and switch off. Actually, sometimes I think when teams are struggling or players are struggling, you play yourself into form. Yeah? You come from a point where you're performing at 1 out of 10, then you start lifting your performances and get to a point where you're performing fairly, and let's say at 7 out of 10. Then you're going to win games. Now, I think what many Spurs fans would want right now is Spurs to switch on and start winning. But need to play themselves into form. And for me, for the two results that they picked under Dizabi, the loss the previous week, which was 1-0, not a very good performance going forward, and then the 2-2, maybe is a step forward. Now, their next game, they've got to find a way, because it's at Wolves, a Wolves side that will be relegated next weekend, depending on other results around them. If they do not win at Wolves, then we can comfortably say Spurs will be relegated at the end of the season. Because they've wasted some games in there. Of course, the performance have not been good enough. That's how you end up where you are. I spoke earlier about the toxicity around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. There is in the early part of the season, I didn't feel the fans were backing the club enough. Then we all know about the injuries. They've had so many injuries, but every club has had injuries. So injuries these days are no longer an excuse. Now, I remember Jurgen Klopp some years ago arguing that the reason why coaches are hired is to find solutions in situations like this. So maybe that's not an excuse enough, but they need to find a way to win a game of football.
Leeds is doing that. They're now closer to the top.
Yeah, with 39, I think the other teams have done well enough to distance themselves from Spurs. Leeds, that 3-0 drubbing, or rather 4, of Wolves, have taken a giant step. Now, yes, I say the 40-point mark is magical. I also know West Ham have been relegated with 40 points before. But at 39, you think another 2 results Leeds will be there. And they are having a very good final kick to end the season, considering that they also have to play in that FA Cup semi-final against Chelsea. They will be feeling very, very confident about their chances of staying in the league. The same could be said of Nottingham Forest. Just to emphasize, Nottingham were in a bit of trouble and came from a goal down to beat Burnley. That shows teams that are fighting. And there's something we've debated a lot on this show about the teams that are in that part of it, that part of the league, who are playing a mini league to stay up. I think Spurs are the worst. They are playing the worst football, because even if you compare with Wolves and Burnley and Wolves will be relegated regardless. West Ham, Nottingham Forest, Leeds and Spurs, that 4-team mini league, I think Spurs are the ones who are struggling the most. So they are not getting results, but the teams next to them are getting the results they need. And it might just come down to the final 1 or 2 games of the season. But before it gets to that, now that this week they are going to spend it in the bottom 3, they've got to steal a result somewhere at the weekend. Go to Wolves, go to the Molineux and get a result. If they don't, and West Ham, and let's say West Ham, Leeds and Nottingham Forest get a result again in the next week, then we can start to write off Tottenham, or even find the best obituary writers to remind us that Tottenham are going to be relegated.
You know, a part of me, I just remember Harry Kane at Tottenham and what he did. And thank God he left, because now the Farmers League,
thank God?
The Farmers League, where he's part of his scoring. Can we even talk about a treble?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. And what a story that would be for Vincent
Kompany.
Kompany.
Yeah.
And I've said on this show before that to even imagine that generations of the past and us have watched some great Bayern Munich sides. The people watch the generation of the Gerd Mullers, yeah, would argue, or Franz Beckenbauer, apologies, would argue that they've watched some great Bayern sides. I'd also argue I have. The team that Ottmar Hitzfeld coached that played multiple Champions League finals in the late 90s and early 2000s was a very, very good Bayern Munich side. And then I had the opportunity to live long enough to watch a Bayern Munich of 2013 under Jupp Heynckes. Then there are those who could also equate to the Bayern of the COVID period 2020. And they've won, those two sides won trebles. The one of 2013 and 2020. And no team has won 3 trebles. So now that Bayern Munich have sealed the league title with that 4-2 drubbing of Stuttgart, where they had to come from a goal down, and they've won the league with over 100 goals scored, they are still on course to hit the record of the Bundesliga, which has lesser teams than all the other leagues, because they have 18. They're on course to beat that record, which is 91 points per season. It's unthinkable. If you told many of us 2 years ago, 1.5 seasons ago, when they hired Vincent Kompany, you would never have pointed to it. But he has a great striker in Harry Kane, who came off a bench actually to score in that one. And this is in the 30s for goals in the Bundesliga. I thought even it's a 34 game season. You can't describe it as a farmers league, but in the end, the few times if you don't watch a Bundesliga, you get to watch Bayern Munich. They're really a very good team, a very, very good team. So it's not too far-fetched to think about the treble. The league is done. They have a semi-final to play against PSG, and then the DFB Pokal too. I don't know, when we throw in the numbers of this team and your Heynckes and 2020 and the 70s, then we can make an argument that this is the greatest Bayern Munich side we've watched. Because I'm a big fan of someone like Arjen Robben from the other 2013 team, I'd struggle to want to argue that this is a better team. I would still have an inclination for nostalgia. Yet I managed to get rid of it most of the time. But what a performance, what a run Bayern have had in the league. You can describe the Bundesliga every way you want to describe it, but you don't choose your opponents. You beat whoever is put before you, and that's what Bayern do. And they beat them in a manner that also emphasizes that they are by far the best team in the Bundesliga, and sometimes perhaps they need to win the Champions to justify that they are the best team in Europe, and maybe they'll need to do that.
Inter Milan is also doing well. They have they are on top of the table, but there's still a lot of mathematics, you know. Torino, Milan, some have to lose, some have to win in order for their place to be sealed.
I felt the previous week is when Inter Milan won the league, but now this weekend is when they stamped it, because they won their game and then Napoli were beaten at home by Lazio. A thrill of the game. Whatever Napoli were missing, now Lazio would go the other side and convert, eventually finishing 2-0. Milan have run out of steam. Como were beaten. So it's largely a fight for me for the Champions League places, because Inter will be crowned champions. And you've got to look back perhaps on the renaissance of Marcus Thuram as one of the things that has led them there in the period when Lautaro Martinez has been out injured. And I also spoke about how the variety of scorers that they've had is also a quick factor, that they are nearly 20 goals ahead of the teams that are second in terms of scoring. So there's going to be quite a fight. The one we are talking about in England for the top 5 position, I think there's also going to be a fight in Italy for that, between Napoli, Milan, Como, Juventus, and Roma. Yeah, that's where it's going to be. And Roma dropped points this weekend. Drew with Atalanta in a game that never stopped giving. I thought Roma should have won the game. They had better chances than Atalanta, but somehow they could just not find that winning goal. And you could almost sense the frustration from the white head of Gianpiero Gasperini in the latter phases of the game, because his team created enough to win a game of football, but could not find that killer punch against Atalanta. So while Inter Milan can now get their champagne on ice. Must be non-alcoholic champagne. The other teams are in a very huge fight for Europe, and that will go down to the final few weeks of the season.
Atletico surprisingly lost.
For everything that Diego Simeone is, he does not win trophies in a glut. Yes, he's won 2 league titles in his time as Atletico Madrid manager, in a league that is very difficult because financially, Real Madrid and Barcelona take over 50% of the TV revenue in Spain. But you felt at the moment the pair were out of the Copa del Rey, and Atletico Madrid go to a final. They have no business losing to Real Sociedad. They have no business. But they were on the back foot very early because they conceded in the first minute within seconds. And from then on, they were fighting back. In the end, they lost in a penalty shootout by 4-3. But it must be very, very painful. And for a moment, I felt either they had been drained by that game against Barcelona in the Champions League, where they did beat Barcelona to get into semi-finals. But they were also not good enough. I thought they gave Sociedad a little bit too much respect, and Sociedad were there to pick in the moments when they won the front foot, and eventually the result wasn't the kind that you'd say unexpected, but also it's a reminder that Diego Simeone does not convert most of his fortune into wealth. Yeah, in that moment I felt you've got to win. The moment they knocked out Barcelona and Real Madrid were knocked out earlier by Albacete, you've got to go and convert that into a trophy. And they do not convert that now. They just have to go and win the Champions League. What other excuse would they have?
They have, yeah. But speaking about wealth, a very sad story coming from women's rugby here. The Black Pearls have pulled out. Tell us more about it. How sad. 4-time champions.
You always think that when you win 4 league titles, you're one of the better resource teams in the league. And they've given me so much joy as a person. It's also a team that has some of, I would say, my closer friends in women's rugby, especially Charlotte Mudola, Council Charlotte Mudola, because she's a lawyer. I don't know if she still works with URSB. But it's a reminder of the struggle of Ugandan sports teams and resources, because you would think that because Black Pearls have been winning, then they are in a position where they are one of the better or the privileged sides in the league. And for them to pull out the way they did, because they did write a letter to Uganda Rugby Union informing them of their intention to pull out of the league because they do not have the money. They struggle to keep players training. They struggle to transport players to games and even put a meal on the table for the players. So they inform the union. The union calls a meeting requesting them to reconsider and stay in the league. But the union was also not offering any kind of solutions in terms of...
do they have it?
I'm not very sure they do. Yes, they have fairly big sponsorship, in excess of 2 billion shillings. But most of the money they get from their corporate sponsors is for the men's game. And there's hardly very little left for the women. And most of it that they get is for the rugby cranes. So the union too also have their hands tied. Yeah, you're asking someone who is also carrying their begging bowl elsewhere. So you hope they fill their begging bowl, and when the overflow comes, then they give the women's game. But it's also a reminder, I've seen many people around the women's game over the past 20 or so years, from when it was introduced here by Jim Park and Ian Walker in 2004. There are many people who have argued that the game is not catered for because the union does not value women's rugby besides seeking a vote. Yeah, when the president comes or the chairman of the union, if they want a vote for a men's representative, then they act like they care about the game. That's one argument. The other is an interview that our colleague with Daily Monitor, Fred Muambo, did during the month of March, where Hellen Buteme, and probably we should have seen the warning signs, Hellen Buteme did argue that, and I refer to Hellen Buteme because you cannot discuss Uganda women's rugby without her name. That's how important she's been. That's how much she served the game. She gave an interview where she said that the women's game must move from survival to thrive, because the game has been run in a state of survival for the past 22 years and has never taken off in terms of a game that can thrive. So that's been the challenge, that even for the teams that like Thunderbirds from Chadondo, who are attached to Heathens, even they struggle to get those kind of resources. But while you discuss Black Pearls, I think it's a reminder of the struggle that Uganda sports teams go through. Because while I'm mentioning Black Pearls because they're a big story for pulling out after winning 4 league titles, Kakira Simbas, who should be fairly resourced, because when you hear the word Kakira, you look at your sugar bowl and know you spent money. So they failed to travel to their game against the Stanbic Black Pirates at the weekend. And the reason they did not travel is money. So it's a reminder about maybe the state of rugby, but even discuss rugby is to see sport through a very narrow prism. I think every team that I know in this league, in sport, with the exception of the institution clubs, and lately Villa and Vipers, every team is struggling. If you think about Nemo Stars, who will be traveling who have traveled for volleyball in Kigali, if you think it's Talk Sports or Kampala Hockey Club or Weatherhead or Wananchi, wherever you look, besides the institutional clubs or those ones by companies like City Oilers or maybe URA and a few others, you have maybe over 500 clubs. So the ones that are not struggling are the exception. So Black Pearls tell a story of the state of Ugandan sport, and I think fully.
Now, some good news in the basketball side. They're taking basketball to Hoima, which is good. It's going to be played there. I'm wondering, is that some kind of regional balance or affirmative action, and can that help in bringing more money to the game? To the games, to local sport generally? Bringing
more money in the short term, no. In the long term,
because maybe. Who is going to go to Hoima to watch a basketball game?
It's a very difficult decision that FUBA made, but I also understand where they are coming from. I think if you're running the Federation of Uganda Basketball Associations today, and Nasa Serunjoji, the president, you want to be in the good books of National Council of Sports. What better way than using a facility that is under NCS? Yeah? So when they put out the fixtures for the second round of the league, and right now they're on a break, the league is going to resume, I think, this week on Friday, is that the first thing that all of us picked out was the fact that they are going to play some of their second round fixtures in Hoima. Unfortunately, the teams that are going to play there are not teams from Hoima. So you're going to take something that many locals at the Hoima City Arena do not relate with, because the teams they are taking there are JK Lady Dolphins and the JT Jaguars, and then Namwongo Blazers and the City Oilers. So you want to spread the game. Maybe it's easier to spread the game by using the teams that are there. But it's also not bad to start with teams that have come from here and then maybe go and interest people. They could start on that weekend. Will they be free
with it for the Wananchi, the people?
The details of that have not yet been released by FUBA. But I love a situation where maybe students of high school are invited to come to the Hoima City Stadium and watch the game for free. Because in the end, for all those 4 teams that will be traveling, I can only bet on Namwongo Blazers, perhaps using a coaster or 2 taxis and taking 30 fans to Hoima. And the arena is not a 30 people seater, yeah? It's much more than that. So it's a very knife-edge situation, I think, for FUBA. They need to do it, because then all of us will come back and say, government built a facility in Hoima and say, white elephant. Yeah, we can't use it. We do not have the capacity to use it. And even those who question the wisdom of government to build a basketball arena in Hoima where we've never seen a team from there playing the league. At least we've seen a team from Gulu playing the league, yeah? Gulu Hawks. We've seen a team from Kilembe, from Kasese playing the league. We've never seen any from Hoima. It's never bad to start, but the timing is a bit difficult, and the game will come up in May. So hopefully by then, FUBA have done enough marketing. They've made enough noise around it to make it an event, and perhaps taken a Shiba or a Spice Diana there and make it some kind of concert that people would want to be there because of everything, including the basketball. Because sometimes when you're introducing something new to a person, you've got to use something they know and then introduce what they do not know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe that would help. But it was a very curious decision for me.
Yeah.
When Fuba said part of the second round we played in Hoima.
Volleyball in Kigali.
I mentioned earlier, by the way, the Convention of Africa Volleyball Championship is going to be happening this week and runs up to the next week. It's a loaded roster in terms of teams. Uganda this time is having 2 clubs play in that championship. Nemo Stars, who are going there for the 8th time, and I've seen they've added one of Uganda's greatest volleyball players to that roster, Daudi Okello. Daudi Okello has played here for Chitende, has played at KVC, has played in Poland, has played in Turkey, has played in South Korea. He's one of the biggest exports in terms of sport, by the way, that we'll have. Just that volleyball does not have the same kind of pull like football does. But that's how good Daudi Okello has been in terms of Ugandan volleyball. It's played in the top leagues in the world. So they've added him to that roster. Nemosas have going there for the 8th time, and they've been there every time ever since George Apora and Smith Okumu came to the side. They are 2 most experienced players, and they treat this Africa Club Volleyball Championship as a very important part of what they do. But what's different this year is that Sportes, the champions of the league, will be playing on the continent for the very first time in their history. They've always come here, competed, either won the national championship or the league, or finished second, and Uganda has never been able to fill up its quota at the continent because Sportesoro is often up to pull out. But this time, they've swallowed something and decided that they are going to Kigali. Of course, in terms of cost, Kigali is cheaper than where the tournament has been. Because over the years played in Tunisia or Egypt or Morocco, where you might need to spend a little over 65 million on just the air tickets.
To go to Qatar, to go to Africa.
Yeah, to go to Qatar, then go to Africa. But in this case, if it's Kigali, you can take a bus, and that will be cheaper. It's 60 million. You're probably going to be able to rent a village, in Rwanda to play in that tournament. It should be very interesting. I'm looking forward to watching it. And if you have your DSTV, you go to channel 299, Rwanda TV, RTV. The games will be there live for most of the week. And for the first time in the history of this tournament and in Africa, they're even going to be using VAR. So I'm very interested in how much Rwanda have invested in the technology for this particular tournament. So it will be very, very interesting, considering that there is Nemo Stars and Sportes. I'll be spending part of my week watching that, and hopefully my eyes won't sulk.
There's so much, Isma, we know you also don't sleep because you're watching, the Pistons lose. But some good news for Victor Wemby this morning. He's on the shortlist.
Yeah, he's on the shortlist for the MVP. The shortlist that announced, which I think eventually SGA will win, but it's also a very good thing for someone in their 2nd season in the NBA to be nominated for Most Valuable Player of the regular season. It's a testament of how good Victor Wembanyama is. So the shortlist has SGA, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. It has Nikola Jokic of the Denver Nuggets, and then Victor Wembanyama of the San Antonio Spurs. Should be very interesting, but in the end, I think SGA will be able to win. But now we are into the playoffs proper. Forget the playing, explaining, Simanyi, this one has to beat and then play the other, then get in the top 8. No. It's now firmly the top 8. And now, through the weekend, we've been able to watch each of the teams at least once. Each of the teams have played one game. And I want to just go straight through that. OKC were too good for the Phoenix Suns. So they lead that series by 1-0. The score was very many on very few. Yeah, SG and Jalen Williams were unstoppable for the Thunder, and their defense can punish you and you hate being on court. Then still in the Western Conference, in the first round, the Lakers are also 1-0 up against the Houston Rockets. That first game, LeBron James scoring 19 points and 13 assists, but the Rockets were missing Kevin Durant, and no one knows when he's going to return. Hopefully, he's there for game 2. Then game 3, the game of in the Western Conference, the Nuggets against the Timberwolves. The Nuggets won that on the back of Jamal Murray and then Nikola Jokic, who is nominated for MVP, scoring 27 points. Then, like you mentioned, Victor Wembanyama scoring 35 points in that game, which is a franchise high for a playoff debut in a team that has had some of the greatest big men in the history of the NBA. David Robinson and Tim Duncan were watching him, and Tim Duncan had the record before. He had scored 32 on his playoff debut back in 1998. Victor Wembanyama scored 35. So, good going. That series also 1-0. Then in the East, like you mentioned, Ali, the number 8 seed, which is Orlando Magic, went to Detroit and beat the Pistons. The Pistons looked very rusty, the seed 1 from the Eastern Conference, because they had not played in a little over a week. They had still their number 1 seeding, so they rested most of their players for the final week of the season, and it showed. And the Orlando Magic came out punching and took that first game. Then the Cleveland Cavaliers also very good for the Raptors. That backcourt of James Harden and Donovan Mitchell were too hot to handle. The Raptors could try but couldn't get even close. The New York Knicks are also leading the Atlanta Hawks by 1-0 after winning their season opener. And then Jason Tatum scored 25 points. He's someone to look out for as they beat the 76ers. Also in that series, that is also 1-0. And now, by the end of this week, perhaps by the time we do this again, we should have seen at least 3 games. Some teams will be chasing a sweep. And I almost sense there are several teams that are going to be swept. Yeah? And this is that are going to be losing 4-0 in their 7-game series. But maybe like you started, the biggest story should be Victor Wembanyama. 35 on your playoff debut.
Yeah.
He's a man and a half. 7'3" with skills that can play as a guard, can put the ball on the floor, can shoot a 3. He's the best defensive player in the league, the highest number of blocks. It's amazing. It's amazing that we are able to watch this kid too come through.
CAF champions is down to 2.
We are into the final, and the final will be between the team that we are all biased for, because the Mamelodi Sundowns are back in that final. They will be playing against ASFA. ASFA is the army side, the Royal Armed Forces of Morocco. Sundowns were able to knock out Esperance by 2-0 on aggregate. They won the first leg in Tunis and then won the second leg in Pretoria. Someone actually told me, Emanzi Ndiamohachi, one of our colleagues, told me that when he traveled to Tunisia, they went to a city that is far outside of Tunis. Maybe it's saying like they were in Kabale, but the games, Tunis is in Kabale, but the games they went to play were somewhere in Gulu. But in every shop they could find something of Esperance. That's how popular this team is. But they were knocked out by Sundowns. So Sundowns, who have not won a Champions League title since 2016, have another chance in the final. They lost last year's final to the Pyramids of Egypt. So they have an opportunity to atone for that. And they will start that as favorites because they are playing against a side in ASFA who have not played the Champions League final since the 1980s. So it's almost skewed for one team or the other. And for my own bias, I want Denis Onyango to win that, even if he's on the bench. If Onyango goes and delivers that, then the arguments are for and against him being one of the greatest Ugandan footballers will be sealed largely.
Now, for this section, why should we take note, Isma, of these ex-players who are buying clubs? Maybe it's a side hustle, economy. They're trying to stay relevant and, invest their money, their hard-earned money. John Terry is now joining the list.
Yeah, he's the latest because he's purchased a majority stake in Colchester United, a team that is playing, I think, in League 2 currently and have a chance to get promoted to League 1. Sometimes you think it's become trendy because the other week we also saw Lionel Messi purchase UD Conella, a team in Barcelona in the Catalonia region that is in the 5th division and are far off from playing in the La Liga one day. And we also know Ronaldo has purchased one. Then Messi and Luis Suarez have also purchased a team, I think, in the lower division in Uruguay. And part of the deal that he has with Inter Miami is one that would make him a shareholder when he retires. And he will be sitting in the boardroom alongside David Beckham and all the other investors. I think it's part of a trend these ex-players, especially from the past 20 years, have made so much money that they no longer have the struggle of the past where they have to go back to survive as agents or as coaches. A basic example, many years ago, one of the players I love the most because he's trying his hand in coaching is Frank Lampard. And last week he got Coventry promoted as a coach from the Championship. They are coming to the Premier League for the first time in 25 years. Frank Lampard was...
Is it 25?
Yeah, 25 years.
I remember Coventry.
Yes,
no,
you do.
I don't. It's my don't. I'm confusing it with
Coventry. Robbie Keane played for them many years ago. They got relegated.
Am I that old?
Yes, you are. They got relegated in 2001 and now they are back. Now, one of the most interesting stories I've ever seen, and this is just to emphasize how rich these ex-players now are. At some point, Frank Lampard was job hunting because he has a passion to coach. Forget that the Gary Nevilles and Jamie Carraghan's and Roy Keanes and Patrick Vieira's and Thierry Henry's are now on television and doing punditry. And maybe football has created so much opportunities that now they can come in and be paid top dollar. To the extent that I've seen a story in the past where Thierry Henry is paid as much as $4 million and Gary Lineker was paid as much as £2.5 million during his time as a lead pundit for the BBC. Frank Lampard wanted a job and was linked to Norwich at the time. To look at the numbers, Lampard was richer than the owner of Norwich. And the owner of Norwich at the time, the lady, if you've watched Norwich on TV, you've seen the lady with white hair and she always wears a yellow scarf. She owns the biggest confectionery company in the UK. Cakes, yeah, that kind of stuff. And she was worth anywhere in excess of £30 million. Now she was richer than that. So because they have all these resources and they've made very smart investment, you look at the investment portfolio of someone like Ronaldo, yeah, with the hotels and the chain and the perfumes and all this kind, and the boxers and all the things he's selling, or David Beckham. We are gone past the era where every ex-player is going to end up in coaching or as an agent or as a physio or something around the game, or as a goalkeeping coach in the case of goalkeepers. They have so much wealth on them that they've now become largely investors. So, and it's something, and there's going to be an interest, because we've seen even with Dalim, I think, is a shoulder at Real Valladolid, or Valladolid, as the Spaniards call it. It's a very interesting direction that players have taken, because you wouldn't see this 20, 30 years ago. Yes, players were going into management, the Franz Beckenbauers, eventually as a coach of the German national football team, and then as a president of the FA. But the options have opened up so much with the kind of resources they have that the next trend is who is the next buyer of a football club.
A question as we conclude, as we end today. Where is Zinedine Zidane? Is he still on the beach? Like, I've wondered, does he have small businesses here?
He's going to take over with the France national team after the World Cup. He's going to be coaching that because Didier Deschamps is going to walk away in July, and hopefully he'll walk away with a medal as world champion, and that will write a very good story for him. Won the World Cup as France captain back in 1998, and he's also won the World Cup as a coach in 2018. Now he has an opportunity to walk away on a high as a champion again. Then thereafter, Zinedine Zidane. You could say rumors, but very good deep throat sources have been quoted saying that Zidane will become France national team coach in July.
Okay. Thank you for watching Second Take with IDK. Lots of opinions, lots of deep insight there. Like, subscribe, share, keep the comments coming. We love to hear from you. And yeah, we will be inviting maybe some people every once in a while. Do take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time.
Are you tired of the daily hustle and bustle, the endless traffic just to get your little one to a good school? GMS Nabingo offers a unique blend of academic excellence with a holistic child development in both nursery and primary. We provide a national curriculum with an international touch. Enroll your child today by visiting our campus along Trinity College Nabingo Road. GMS Nabingo, where every child's potential is a reality. Because we care.